Well, everybody, the Vikings lost the Super Bowl 23-7. The Chiefs walk away with the Lombardi, and the Vikings walk away empty-handed. We'll talk about all of it here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Vikings listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement. Use promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout. So, our boys didn't sparkle, did they? The Vikings fall 23-7 to the Kansas City Chiefs in their first ever Super Bowl appearance, and we'll break it all down. I've got some theories as to what happened. Some players have already revealed some of what happened, but first let me just recap the game for you, and we'll sort of go moment by moment, all right? So the Vikings do get the ball first, but they couldn't go anywhere, and they would end up punting it away 3 times. They would go punt, fumble, punt in their first 4 possessions. And the Chiefs went field goal, interception, field goal. So the Chiefs managed to move the ball a little bit on the Purple People Eaters, but to the defense's credit, some of that was short fields. One of those was a short field set up by a fumble that then had to be intercepted on the way back by Paul Krause, ever brilliant as he always is. And then there was, of course, the wheels really came off. You're down 9-0, and it didn't feel, it just felt like the beginning of the game, like you go behind 3-0 in any game and you're not going, all right, well, that's it, ball game, but like field goals just didn't feel like they were really doing it. But honestly, they would have, even if it weren't for any of the other scores. The Chiefs still would have won 9-7. The Vikings only mustered 1 touchdown in the entire damn game. But really, the wheels fell off after Charlie West, normally a pretty reliable returner. Shoot, I like him as a returner. I think he's good. I think he's explosive. He's somebody I've been mostly happy with, but he muffed the punt, or he muffed the kickoff. And I hope this isn't what he's always remembered for, because he is, in his own right, a very, very cool, fun player. But he muffs it, Kansas City recovers, and then, right away, they score on a running play. That made it 16-0, which would be the score at halftime, and that's it. They go into the locker room down 16 points, and then they came out, they played a whole half of football, and then they went back into the locker room down 16 points. They did manage to get a touchdown, and it was 16-7. And, it was 16-7. All right, sure. It's only 9 points. You feel like you could come back. You got a whole quarter left. Like, we can do this. And then on the ensuing drive, stupid little flare pass out to Otis Taylor, that goes for a big, long 46-yard touchdown. I can't believe it, man. What it turns out happened on that was Ursel Mackleby, who had hurt his shoulder a little bit in the Rams game, separated it fully on that tackle, and that's why he slid off the way that he did. It didn't look like that tackle had all the force we're used to seeing out of Mackleby, so I kind of figured something was up, and yeah, so it was an injury thing. But either way, Karl Koselke has to take that angle better, and he has to get the guy down, get the guy slowed down at least, so you can live to fight another day. Maybe have a goal line stand at the 10, hold it to a field goal. You're only down 12, it's okay, but you go right back to being down 16. And then for the rest of the game, Joe Kapp running for his life, he gets knocked out of the game. And that would be it. Joe Kapp would end the game 16 for 25 for 183 yards, took 3 sacks, threw 2 picks, and got knocked out of the game twice. The dude got the crap beat out of him. And look, there's been some stuff going around Twitter and everything about how maybe he was hungover for the game or something. Look, for one, it's Joe Kapp. Of course he was hungover. He's always, of course. He's a party boy, right? I kid. He didn't seem that didn't read to me as a guy that had his foot halfway out the door. Joe Kapp, if there's anything to criticize about Joe Kapp, it's that he probably shouldn't have taken all those hits in the games leading up to that. I mean, he took some hits he didn't have to take in that Browns game, the NFL championship. And maybe his body would have held up better if he was a little fresher and he didn't take all that contact. But, like, I mean, come on, asking Joe Cap to not go relish contact is like asking a tornado to turn left at your house. Like, it's just not, that's not how it works. It's a force of nature, and that's just not going to happen. So, look, the Vikings were favored by 2 touchdowns in this game. And I think really that's more of a factor of politics. If you were listening to me in the week leading up to this game, I was telling you, I mean, the Chiefs are a good team. They have players that can play, and they do stuff that I'm a little worried. You know, they have an interesting scheme, and they're well coached, and they're well put together. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of Hall of Famers that were on the field tonight, or last night, I guess, as you're listening to this. But I don't think the Vikings should have been favored by 14 points. I told you that last week. I still think they should have been favored, and I still think that it is, like, I think they were a better team than the Chiefs. They weren't last night, but they're a better team overall than the Chiefs. And, I mean, the Chiefs deserved their win. They were the better team when it counted, but I think you play that game 10 times, and I think the Vikings do win some of them. So I want to talk about what I think happened here and what made it so that the stupid Mickey Mouse League team, right, the AFL, that was the last AFL game, by the way, which is kind of wild. We're going to have like AFL, NFL together now, and they'll all just be under the umbrella of the NFL. So that was the last game that an AFL team, like a nominally AFL team, ever played. The Chiefs are going to be just another NFL team now. And I think that they really proved that the AFL it like belongs. You know, and I think a lot of people thought that because they were a smaller league to begin with, I mean, they've been drafted out of the same pool since 1967 here, man. Like, they've been part of this. This is now teams made of the same pools, and the 2 leagues are converging. And I think it's appropriate to merge now. And we'll see if it's more than a business move or if it's really good for the league or if it even lasts, right? There's a lot of beef. A lot of people hate each other now. But I think the AFL proved that, like, this isn't a Mickey Mouse league. This is really just another league full of other viable teams, and they shouldn't have been favored by that much. There's not like a shame, and it's not like they lost to a college team, right? The Chiefs are a good team, and they deserve their win. But that said, we still got to talk about what happened, and the Vikings underperformed what they are capable of by so much in this game, and we have to talk about it. So we're going to do that. First, let me talk to you about Blue Nile. At BlueNile.com, you can celebrate all of life's special moments, whether it's an engagement ring or just a timeless classic piece, whether you're celebrating something or just getting someone a gift for no reason because you love them. Show them that you love them with Blue Nile. Whether it's a milestone or you're popping the question or whatever, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They also adhere to the Kimberly process, which is the kind of industry-accepted universal standard for ethics in terms of making sure that you're not purchasing from a supplier that is giving you conflict diamonds or blood diamonds or other human rights violations haven't gotten your diamonds. They adhere to the Kimberly process. And they do that not only with their diamonds, but with their gold and their silver as well. They make sure that it's all ethical, and that's not something you get from every diamond company. So make that moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Vikings listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement, so use code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in a discreet package, so it won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. Hey, so I've got a favor to ask of you. We at Locked On have put together a survey so that we can learn more about listeners like you and make all of your favorite podcasts even better. It's your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcasts. So go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and if you finish it, you get a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. Thanks for your help. Let me start with the offense. The offense Look, they weren't the juggernaut unit the defense was. The offense was good. The defense was like nothing the league had ever seen really before. That said, the offense is still very good. I mean, we've had all sorts of heroics from Joe Cap. What happened to all that, right? What happened to Mick Tingelhoff in this game? I mean, that dude is a perennial All-Pro. He got killed in this game. What happened there? What happened to where'd Gene Washington go, right? What about all those Dave Osborne? I mean, he was making dudes miss like nobody's business last week against the Browns. What happened to that, right? Why wasn't Bill Brown cracking skulls like we know him for doing so well? What's going on with all of this? And I guess the answer that I can come up with, you could come up with stuff like, well, maybe they just weren't up for the big moment, or they weren't. And I'm sure some of those narratives will persist over time. But for me, I mean, this team was too dominant among the entire NFL. Even if you admit, all right, the AFL and NFL, yeah, sure, they deserve to be in the same league. Well, if it's the same league, if the AFL is the same league as the NFL, the Vikings kicked the NFL's ass. What happened? And I think part of it is because the Chiefs evolved in the AFL and in a different world. I think we had a bit of a Galapagos effect where two teams, even with the same DNA, are sort of evolving in a different way. And so they're going to look similar but different. And what we're used to seeing in the NFL is 4 defensive linemen with 3 linebackers behind them. Call it a 4-3. And what they are used to seeing in the AFL is the opposite. 3 defensive linemen, and you usually have one big one plunked in the middle, and then 4 linebackers behind them, and it's just a different world. So you call that a 3-4. And that's really the main difference. You know, when we're playing, when the NFL teams are playing, when NFL teams play, we're really attacking the guards with that 4-3 defense. I mean, we're having Alan Page go up against a guard, and he's going to be quicker than that guard, and that's our goal. With the Chiefs, they're attacking the center, and so they have Curly Culp, who's bigger than Mick Tingelhoff. Look, if you ask me, I think both Curly Culp and Mick Tingelhoff are going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. Like, losing to Curly Culp is definitely no shame. But, I mean, he had like a 30-pound advantage on the guy. And Mick Tingelhoff, we know he's smaller and he's lighter for a center, and that's been his advantage throughout his whole career. It's why he keeps making those All-Pros. But in this case, it turned out to be his biggest weakness. It was really the catalyst for all of it was that the Vikings just got beat in the middle a lot, and that's going to really wreck your run plays, right? If you can't run up the middle, for one, you have to run side to side, and if you have to run side to side, that gives everybody else time to get involved with the play, and so now just the threat of Curly Culp is messing with your offense. And from a pass perspective, A, you can't run, so you can't threaten the run, so forget, play action bombs, and B, you're still getting crushed at the snap every single time. Curly Culp ate Tingelhoff's lunch, and it really sucks. I love Mick Tingelhoff. He's a superstar player, but he got his lunch ate today, and Joe Cap was running for his life. Maybe when we get to go see the tape, we'll see Gene Washington was streaking down the field wide open all the time, and Joe Cap just couldn't find him because he was running for his life. Maybe we'll find he was covered anyways. I don't think you'll find any comfort in either answer to that, but that is kind of what I see happening in this one. And look, we have good players here. Like, I don't think this is something that we got to figure out how to deal with a 3-4 defense. But I think that's more of a coach's question than it is. I mean, it's just kind of the coaches have to go to the whiteboard and figure that out. And they just weren't ready, Carl Koselke talked about this. We'll get to it on defense, but he talked a little bit about just not being that familiar. The Vikings had never seen anything like this from the Chiefs on either side of the ball. They didn't know it. They know the NFL, and they dominated the NFL, but they only had a week to prepare for this. And you can only get to know a team so well in a week. And when they're so different, and you have to cram a whole career's worth of knowledge into 1 week, you're going to make mistakes, and you're just not going to be quite as good at it. And I think part of that happened here, and they just couldn't figure out how to protect against the fronts that the Chiefs presented. I think they did kind of figure it out a little better in the second half, but then it was too little too late. They were already down 16 points, and the dynamic of the game had changed so much. And then Joe Cap gets knocked out, and we got Garrett Coazzo running around in the Super Bowl. That's not going to win anybody anything. At any rate, there is a decent chance that Joe Cap is not the Vikings quarterback next year. I don't know who the quarterback will be. I hope Joe Cap comes back. I love Joe Cap. I love his toughness. I love his grit. And I want to see him come back, but there is a decent chance that him getting his shoulders separated on that sack, getting knocked out of the game for the second time, is the last time we saw him as a Viking. And if that is the case, I wish we could have given him a better send-off than that. But really, I think what people are going to be super confused about is the defense. What happened to that D? How did they give up 23 points? Yeah, there were a couple short fields, but they gave up 23 points. We'll talk about it. But first, let me talk to you about a good old Gramble. Look, if you wanted to say use betonline.net's live betting apparatus, log on at halftime and decide whether or not the Vikings would make a comeback, you could have done that like me. And I didn't win that bet. I thought the Vikings would come back and win it. They sure didn't, and I hope you were smarter than that. But if you're the kind of person that loves to bet like that likes to bet in the middle of games and see if you can't figure out how the game is going to end in the middle of it, you can use betonline.net for that. You can also build player props. How many yards will Gene Washington get? Or how many touchdowns are going to go to Bob Grimm, that kind of thing. Or you can just bet on whatever, regular lines, spreads, news, scores, odds, all of that stuff for every sport. They got you covered at betonline.net. You can even play your favorite Vegas casino games. So head on over to BetOnline and get yourself a Grambling. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, let's talk about the defense. I don't want to talk about this. This is the part that really breaks my heart. The Purple People Eaters averaged less than 10 points allowed per game this year. It's one of the best defensive performances, if not the best defensive performance we've seen since the Vikings came into football, and maybe even before then, unless you want to go back to 1935 when the sport was quite a bit different. This was a phenomenal defense, and they gave up 23. They haven't given up that many points since week 1 against Fran Tarkenton. So what happened, I think there's two main things that happened here. I guess three main things that happened, because the first one that is more minor, but it's worth considering, is they weren't really set up to succeed. And I think the offense and the special teams really let them down. I mean, there was a fumble that gave the Chiefs the ball right at point blank range. There was a punt from in the middle of the Vikings own end zone. I mean, Bob Lee was kicking past his own goalpost, and then so that set up one of the field goals. The Chiefs had to get like one first down, and they got a field goal. And then on the Bob Otis touchdown, I mean, a player's shoulder separated mid-tackle. That'll do it. That'll mess you up, And so you're getting down to the point where you're like, well, it's really just like one or two mistakes, and the rest of it is kind of not. There's at least an excuse for it, and I don't think. I hope this game doesn't go down as the game where Hank Stram and the Chiefs figured out the Vikings defense, because I think a lot of it was just luck and short fields, and I don't think they played as bad as the score necessarily suggests. So I hope this game doesn't go down in history that way. But that's not to say that Hank Stram didn't kind of figure out a little bit of the Vikings. Part of it is that Chiefs offense, growing up in the AFL, when, 5 years ago, I mean, they had to get viewers. They had to be kind of a spectacle. And so they started running reverses, and then they realized reverses kind of work. So defenses had to learn how to defend them, and that sort of led to the way the AFL looks and why AFL football looks a little different than NFL football. And the differences between AFL football and NFL football, the Vikings were unable to respond to, and the Chiefs were able to leverage. But part of it, too, is just the way that they'll come up, and I'm sure you noticed this watching it on TV. It's like nothing we've ever seen before, or at least not me, until I really started studying the AFL in preparation for this game. But, I mean, I didn't go back and do that in the middle of week 13, I mean, this is something that's pretty new to me, and I kind of feel like it's new to the Vikings, too. Why would they watch AFL games randomly in the middle of week 13? But, I mean, they come to the line in one formation, and they just, morph to another formation and snap the ball. That's going to be really hard to process all in, real time. And then beyond that, they have all sorts of reverses. You got a guy running behind the quarterback and in front of the quarterback, and all of that misdirection is like nothing. I mean, the NFL is a very straight up and down league. You hit the guy in front of you, and whoever pushes who wins. This was a lot more tricksy and a lot more fancy, and there were a lot of bells and whistles that I just think we weren't used to. I don't know. Maybe we'll get some answers. Hank Stram had a microphone on him for the game, and they actually might release some of that sound so we can hear what Hank Stram was saying during the game, and maybe that can give us some answers. I know I'm going to listen to that as painful as it might be. The moral of the story is I don't think the Vikings were comfortable enough with the Chiefs offense in the way that you can get comfortable with the Lions offense or the Packers offense when you play them twice a year and you know what you're up against. I mean, they've never played the Chiefs ever. They haven't played an AFL team at all ever. And I think that unfamiliarity really sank them. And I think that's part of why the secondary wasn't banging people out. I mean, that's why you got one Paul Krause interception because he's a superhero, but that's why you didn't have as much disruption there. And then in terms of up front, the Purple People Eaters look, they're phenomenal players, right? I think all four of them are going to end up in the Hall of Fame someday. But the Chiefs, I think, found a way to really take advantage of what those guys do best. I mean, we know Marshall and Eller and Page, they're really good at getting upfield and really having that quick trigger off the snap. And whether you like it or not, Alan Page is going to be 2 steps upfield before you can react to that. And I think a lot of teams lose to those guys because they're going to try to prevent them from getting 2 steps upfield, and that's their superpower. You can't do that. But the Chiefs said, okay, you can come upfield, and we are going to set up our blocking schemes such that you shouldn't come upfield. And if you're going to use your superpower, we're going to punish you for doing that. We're not going to stop you from doing it. We're going to make it wrong to do that. So you either have to give up your superpower, which they eventually did as the game wore on and things kind of clamped down. But again, too little, too late. Because of some of the weird field position things going on in this game, the Chiefs didn't need a lot out of their offense. So they didn't need to get a ton of production. They needed to get field goal, and then they basically got the ball in field goal range twice, and then they had the one breakaway touchdown, which we already talked about, was basically on the back of Ursel Maccabee getting hurt. It's a couple of little things that had a huge impact because of all the weird stuff in the game that really set this one apart. But I guess I'll leave you with this. The whole team's coming back next year, except maybe Joe Cap. We'll see what happens with the contract situation. But other than that, we'll see what the quarterback situation's like. The whole team's coming back. That defense, as good as it has been all year, we get it all back, and we get to run this back again. In the locker room after the game, in an interview with CBS, Bud Grant said, yeah, we're disappointed. Chiefs are a good team, but maybe we can get back in this game someday and get a little bit of redemption. I believe him. I think they can make it back to this game. I think they just need to keep this band together for as long as they can. I don't want to see an offseason where everybody says, let's blow it all up and let's get rid of everybody. No, keep this band together. They're so close. They just need to get into the playoffs and get a little lucky, and I genuinely think these guys can bring home a Lombardi. That's really all you can do. 1970 season's coming around the corner, whether you want it to or not. So that's it. Suit up. Week 1's coming. Time to get ready. We'll talk next week. I'll catch you up on Vikings news and all that stuff. We'll have a good time. I'll see y'all then. And as always, Skol.